Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. By automating the capture, processing and reporting of data from analytic instruments directly into an ELN, companies can increase productivity and improve compliance as scientists spend less time searching for results and making fewer errors associating results with tests. Today's webinar discusses the integration of the MeisterLab automation platform and Arxspan's informatics platforms in collaboration with CatSci to deliver the first commercial off-the-shelf ELN solution for analytical automation. CatSci Ltd is a scientifically led, commercially minded and award-winning innovation partner dedicated to developing economically and environmentally sustainable chemical processes. CatSci proudly serve customers across the globe with projects meeting their needs from IND enabling through product launch. Services include route scouting and selection for early development, process design and optimization. After the presentation, there'll be the opportunity to ask the panelists questions. Please feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A function. Now I'll pass over to Jeff and Guy.
Hello there. You've just heard about CatSci, so I won't say anything more about that, except to say that all our decisions are data-driven. Data is everything in making decisions. So how does this impact? When you try and push a project forward, you need accuracy, reproducibility, and to be able to really dig down into the data. So clients work with us for our ability to interrogate the data and use it to then recommend the next appropriate steps in a project. So to drive this forward, you really need the ability to get hold of that data fast and make use of it straight away. So manual data collection and collation is really quite problematic because it's, especially if you're dealing with large reaction data sets, it's labor intensive and it's quite possible to introduce errors, which then of course impact your accuracy in dealing with making decisions. This is exacerbated by the increasing use of design of experiment and automation. So, key point, faster, more automated data collection really adds business value, helps us drive things forward. Okay, could I have the next slide, please? Okay, well, once you've got this data, what are you going to do with it? Well, you convert it into knowledge. Collating the data is really time consuming and repetitive. So you need to try and automate that. Data manipulation, especially from analytical kit, usually requires access to the hardware itself. Now, obviously, if someone's standing in front of the hardware, nobody else can put samples on. So you're actually causing a problem for yourself if you need to access the hardware to manipulate the data. Also, of course, we're talking about multiple different sorts of analytical data. So quite frequently, you need multiple different pieces of software to analyze this. That means any user has to understand multiple different pieces of software. Probably not ideal. So to get the most value, you need a desktop manipulation tool that you can access the data in away from the originating analytical kit, that is data agnostic, that is able to cope with any sort of data you put at it. Also, automating the collation process and the actual processing of that routine data really helps, because it then frees the chemist and the analyst to use their expertise to make decisions rather than doing routine things. So I've said what I would like and what is happening. Jeff, how do you make it happen?
Okay, so we got in touch with the folks at CatSci through whatever channel we got in touch with them through, and they presented us with this this business problem that Guy has just articulated. And so what we did was work with them to build out a process that would allow them to specify what tests need to be executed on which samples, execute those tests, collect the data in an automated way, and then have the resulting data returned back into the ELN. So let me tell you a little bit about the process that we've set up in collaboration with CatSci. So basically you have an ELN, and I think almost everyone has an ELN at this point. And you want to be able to take a sample that was generated in an ELN, have it tested, and have the results come back. But that's really two different things, right? The first is the experimental process of generating the sample, which is documented in the ELN, and then it's the process of running the analysis. So we've broken that up as such into two separate processes. And for now, we'll talk about the ELN just peripherally and focus on the analytical process. So I have to be able to request an analysis. So our form designer allows you to collect whatever metadata that you need to about the sample, about the nature of the test, about any parameters or anything like that. The form that we have set up for CatSci is actually quite simple. And now you've created basically an analytical request. Then the request is stored. It can be picked up by anyone who has access to pick it up, and has to be executed. So for each test that's been requested, you get a test ID, you execute the test, and then the data are automatically picked up and processed. The processing step is actually very configurable. So your output can be, well, will always be the raw data, but it can be a PDF. It can be analyzed using a number of different out-of-the-box features. It can run through a custom analysis if you've got something proprietary that you're doing. And then those data are packaged up, the results of the analysis and the raw data, and pushed back into the workflow system to fulfill that request. There is an optional approval step with that. I know Guy, the workflow that CatSci has laid out is actually quite simple, but still allows you to kind of accomplish each one of these things. Is there anything on here that you'd like to highlight in particular?
A couple of things, really. I mean, the processing of data. Today, I was looking at some of the abilities of the MGears system, and it's really very simple and straightforward to reprocess data. So a client comes to me and says, we've seen this particular impurity at this particular retention time. What have you seen in your data? I can just look back at my data, reprocess it, and highlight that particular retention time, for instance. Just as simply as selecting the appropriate analytical tests, and selecting a few checkboxes and pressing a button. Doing that manually would be time-consuming, to put it simply. You mentioned approval. Currently, we don't need approval for the processes we were running here. In the past, we have had projects involving controlled substances, which of course have higher approval processes needed. And we do run, quite frequently, we run campaigns and processes involving potent compounds, which may have other controlling factors, such as requiring particular lab specifications or even sex of worker controls. So having the ability to insert approval steps or just need approval from a particular level of manager is extraordinarily useful.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you bring that up, because the way that I've got the slide depicted here and the way that I usually think of it is the approval happens at the end, right? So the analysis is requested, the data are generated, they come back, the lab manager wants to make sure that they're not junk before returning them back to the original requester, and so would review them and approve them and then notify the requester that they're ready. But it sounds like there's also utility in having an approval step before the test is actually executed when it's initially requested. So, you know, that's not something that we had talked about before, but it's actually pretty interesting. We can support either. It sounds like you've seen the latter more than the former. So where the approval is an approval of the request rather than approval of the results. Is that right?
Yeah, true. In the particular projects we tend to do, and the projects I've been involved in, yes, it's certainly. Just to pick up a point about post analysis approval, of course, again, MGears has a QC function in it that enables certain criteria to be selected, and you can automatically process data to flag anything outside certain parameters. This can be fantastically useful when you're doing, you know, 96 well plates or whatever, because it cuts down on the majority of eyeballing of data.
Definitely. No, it's a really powerful tool. It's quite nice. Okay, so let's move on. We wanted to kind of talk about the workflow that the user actually goes through. Sort of, I don't want to quite go to click by click, but almost. So you have a chemist, they run an experiment in the ELN, they generate a sample. So now they want to create a request, analytical request for that sample. So they create that request, they link it to their experiment. So now we know, and they also outline which analyses want to be run on that sample. So it can be any number, one or many. So now we have in the system a linkage from the experiment to the request, and that request outlines exactly what analyses are to be run on that sample. Chemist can log out and go home for the night. Now, somebody in another lab in another place at another time can log in and view a prioritized list of the requests that are outstanding. So there's a whole set of features that are actually not being used by CatSci, but are being used by some of our other customers to prioritize work lists within and among groups, so that you know that your lab is working on the stuff that's actually most important at any given time, right? So the analyst goes to the instrument. Each one of those tests gets a sample ID. Analyst goes to the instrument, runs through the sample ID, and then the data are processed. When the data come back, the request is fulfilled. The user is notified by email, and then they can go and fetch their data. So Guy, I know you have a lot to say about this. I figured I'd give a quick overview of it, and off to you.
Right, okay, so actually the interesting point is, for the chemist, actually the workflow is incredibly simple, which is exactly what you want, but more to the point, it begins and ends with saying, right, I've got an ELN experiment going, I want to make an analytical request, and as far as the ELN is concerned, it generates a code for you. You take that code, walk up to your analytical equipment, put in the code, submit your sample in the normal way. Just all you have to do is insert this code somewhere in the file name, in what you've named your sample. That's it. That's all you have to do. Submit your sample and walk away. After you've walked away, of course, you can carry on and do what you want, because you will get an email notification, as you said, when your sample's ready. So instead of going back, has my sample run? How many was in front of my sample? What was the queue? You get an email. It tells you, your data's there. It's in your notebook. I should also point out, of course, you get a notification in the ELN itself. So if you're sat in front of the ELN doing other things, a notification pings up and tells you, oh, your data's here. So you can look at it there and then. Then, of course, while you're in your notebook, you can then actually pop up the data. You've got access to the raw data. you've got access to a PDF, and of course you can then reprocess the raw data away from the instrument. Mestra is data agnostic, doesn't matter what it is, LCMS, NMR, GC, GCFID, GCMS. You just look at the data and carry out your analysis. You want to resave it. You can resave iteratively, so you can resave multiple versions. All of these are audited by Arxspan, so you have multiple versions of the same file that you can walk back through. So you know exactly what's happened. You can find that easily. And all of this is away from the instrument so that anybody else can rock up to the instrument and put on another sample. So it's a win-win in that the chemist can carry on doing what they're doing once they've put on a sample, but also they're not bunging up the instrument analyzing the sample when they've got it back, analyzing the data when they've got the data back. So at that point, before I carry on talking, I'll hand back to Jeff.
So thanks, Guy. Just one clarification on that. You were talking about getting the data back through the system and then being able to edit it in Mestra or MNOVA. We've done a decent amount of work to make that round trip editing process fairly easy on the user. Can you comment on that? Is that working well for you?
Single click seems to be pretty good. Click on the file, MNOVA opens. You've got the data in there. Obviously, MNOVA's very easy to use. So NMR data, LCMS data, it just pops open, and of course, the user can pre-configure how it's opened. So if you routinely deal with LCMS data, you can automatically get it to open not just the total ion count, but the LC data, and also I believe you can also get it to open windows on the major peaks, so you get the actual mass ion of the major peaks as well. So it really, with a few minutes upfront work, you can then essentially automate everything from there on in. Yeah, very easy, I think is the summary, what you were saying.
That's pretty cool. I actually didn't know that, so that's neat. Yeah, I'm learning stuff on our webinar too. So one of the main topics that we wanted to hit during this webinar as well is that this has been kind of a collaborative project. So Bruker software now includes the Mestra Lab tools, of which we've spoken about MNOVA and MGears a couple of times on the webinar. It also includes all the Arxspan tools, all the enterprise tools. So mostly we've been talking about the ELN and workflow systems on this webinar. And what we've done is put together a fairly thin and agile integration between these two things. There's one missing piece that we haven't talked about on this slide, which is, since we've taken the decision for this workflow to separate the notebook process and the analytical request process, you have a notebook where a sample is generated, and then you have a bunch of analytical data that have been requested by way of a workflow request. Now those data have come back and the workflow request is fulfilled and the user is notified. But really what they need is they need to be able to get the files that fulfilled the workflow request and move them into the ELN with basically no work. Like one click would be perfect. And right now it's not one click. So this is sort of in order to highlight that the work between Bruker and CatSci has been pretty collaborative on this. So one of the last sort of bricks that we have to put in place to make this really easy on the user is a button in the workflow that says, I accept this data, please put it into my notebook. And that is that's on the coming soon list. So in the spirit of that, there's been actually quite a bit of collaboration that we've done. But I think the most important thing, and Guy, I would ask you to comment on this to CatSci, is that this isn't really a new product, right? It's a Master Lab product that's been mature and deployed for a decade or so. It's an Arxspan product that's been mature and deployed for a decade or so, and it's a week or two of work to make them talk to each other in a way that adds a huge amount of value to a customer. So I believe anyway, Guy, that it provided some comfort that these are mature technologies that we're really just tweaking a little bit in order to facilitate this workflow.
As someone who's fairly mature themselves, I can suggest that actually having some maturity is very useful. It does also mean that, of course, everything's stable, because you've gone through the youngster stage of working out all the bugs. So each individual piece of software is stable, fully functions, ergonomically nice to use, because all of the sharp edges have been rounded off by time and use and user feedback. So yeah, absolutely. While I'm talking, one of the points on this slide is support for new HPLC file formats. I just to highlight part of the collaboration, we had conversation with Santi at Mastra, and he said, well, we said these are the formats we would like to use, and he said, okay, fine, send me some files and we'll get to read them. 2 days later, said, yeah, fine, we can read those, that's all right. So it really is that simple. Sending data, coming back with the answers, it's a really quick turnaround.
Yeah, and I would say that, one of the benefits of having a mature customer, right, is that even though you have a mature product, software is never done, right? It can always get better. So, we've worked together pretty closely on some modifications to the ELN that facilitate, your use cases. And I think it's also important from both sides, right, that those modifications were built into the core product. They're not customizations that are customer specific. Those probably everyone in the audience already knows the various pitfalls, both on the vendor side and the customer side of an approach like that. So, obviously we're careful to take the feedback and generalize it out in a way that makes sense for our overall customer base, but also addresses the need that, that was articulated by CatSci. And, we do this with a lot of our customers that come to the table in a collaborative way, but the 2021 development roadmap is now, fairly well littered with feedback from CatSci, and in a good way, because we, the analytical lab specifically is not where Arxspan was optimized for, but it is sort of where Master Lab was optimized for. So as we kind of, smooth out this Venn relationship between the two product sets, it's working very nicely.
Can I just add to that? The Arxspan has obviously had some serious use from the medicinal chemistry community, and a strong feature set there. Coming from a process development community, it's a slightly different angle. So we have a slightly different viewpoint. So again, a different flavor, a different way of looking at things, a slightly different way of looking at things. So the feature set we would like has a slightly different prioritization, and again that adds into, as you say, the 2021 feature list. So it's an evolution, which will just enhance the features and make it more functional for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. I believe that that really kind of concludes the meat of the subject matter that we were trying to address in the webinar. For anyone in the audience that's looking for more information from Bruker about these products, we've got the various contact points outlined on this slide. Probably you can tell if you're listening that we're trying to have an interactive conversation here. This is not a pre-recorded session, so you know, correcting of words and going in the wrong order sometimes just kind of goes with the territory, but it's quite authentic, and hopefully we can connect with you during the question and answer session in a way where you actually get real-time information as well. So with that, Guy, I don't know if you have anything to say in closing, and we can move to Q&A.
No, all I can say really is just welcome questions. I'd be interested to hear other people's viewpoints.
So I think Peter Gravel is going to MC our Q&A. Oh, here he goes.
There we go. So we have a couple of questions coming in. How long did the initial phase of this project take?
So Guy, you'll have to make sure you keep me honest on this. I think we started in late August or early September, as I recall. And I think our last official meeting for how things are going is tomorrow. So on my read, that's about 2 months. Is that correct by you? It might be a little longer than that.
Yeah, that seems eminently reasonable. Of those 2 months, though, to be fair, quite a lot was discussion. I mean, the actual development work you did was of the order of weeks rather than months. So it was more of that time was spent discussing and getting it right, the processes right, than actual development.
Yeah, and I think that's fairly common. I mean, you know, there's always a stage of project where, you know, the vendor has to understand what the customer's workflow is and how do you do it where you are, and, you know, what's your vocabulary and how do you want fields to be named and viewable and what order do you want them in and things like that. And hopefully most of that was, you know, communicating those things back and forth and then showing you how you can change those things on your own, because of course you don't have to have us do it. But yeah, the development piece was fairly small to get to a place where the tool's productive for you, and obviously there's still a lot of development underway to just optimize everything. But yeah, so about 2 months, I guess, to go from you know, okay, we would like to take this process seriously on your side, to okay, here's something that you can actually use, right?
Absolutely. I mean, to be fair, of course, we were testing the instant we got software to test, so we were testing very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But the iterative back and forth was the interesting and productive part.
Definitely, I agree. Okay, I think we're ready for the next question.
Okay. Does it only work with Bruker instruments?
Chef, shall I answer that one?
Please do.
It works. Well, I've yet to find any kind of data that Mestra can't handle, to be honest. We've thrown everything at it. The standard stuff, mass links, ChemStation, all the standard Agilent formats, and of course, Mestra will handle essentially any NMR format you can think of. So it's absolutely agnostic as far as I'm concerned, which is a real strong point.
Now, to be fair to you, Guy, we did have to develop support for 2 new file formats. So earlier on, you did find at least a couple of things that couldn't be handled, but we were able to address them fairly quickly, I think.
Yeah, a couple of things, but then actually, when Santi looked at one of them, it worked straight out the box anyway, but he just didn't realize. So actually, there was only one file format he needed to look at, which is pretty good.
Nice.
Okay. How is the process data returned to the ELN? and what formats?
Jeff, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. I think we probably both will end up saying a few words about that. So having trouble with the word how, so I'll keep my answer as short as possible. The data are returned. So mGears is in this deployment deployed on site behind the firewall at CatSci, and that is where all the data are collected and analyzed. They are then packaged up and they are pushed to our cloud service using our REST API, which is a documented API that any of our customers can use. So that's one how. The other how is the way that the data are processed are defined by the customer, and then the output of that process, which in this particular case is a .mnova file containing all of the raw data that was produced by the instrument, as well as I got a call, so you might not have been able to hear me. The raw data that were produced by the instrument, as well as the PDF that's output with the data summary, are both taken and published to the workflow request to fulfill it and close it out. So I hope that answers the question. Guy, do you think that I missed anything?
The only thing I could add to that really is, yeah, we get currently we get an mnova file, a PDF file, and there is literally a tick box option for mGears to also give us a zip of the raw data. So, you know, completely untouched data, which can then, as part of the ELN, be archived. So you have for want of a better term, an automated backup of the data.
Okay. Okay, another question. Is the solution 21 CFR Part 11 compliant?
Yes. I know that's a fairly short answer, but I'm not sure that any other elaboration is necessary. Yes, across the board.
How long will it take to implement in my lab?
It depends on who you are.
Shall I just comment on how long it took to implement? I mean,
please.
Essentially, we took a computer, nothing fancy, a computer, put the mGears software on it. It was okay. Admittedly, it was already networked, and then the appropriate path names to the analytical kit, and that's admittedly, obviously, there was development work to get to there, but the actual setup was really that simple.
Yeah, I think the development work was done in a way that's generic enough so that it shouldn't need to be touched again. So there's basically two parts to the process to getting it set up. The first is what Guy touched on, which is installing mGears and pointing it to wherever it needs to pick files up from. And also inputting some configuration information into just a dialog box in mGears that says how to contact your instance of the Arxspan ELN. And then the other part is actually configuring the form for the analytical request. So if you use one of the out-of-the-box forms, then it's ready. You know, I'm always kind of hesitant to say same day, but basically same day. However, I think most of the companies that we work with like to make some tweaks to those forms, which is usually maybe a couple of days of iterative process. So if you put your head down and worked on it for a week, it'd be easy to get done in a week.
Can it handle flow cytometry data? FCS files?
Not currently. So we can pick the FCS files up and move them into the workflow engine, and then in exactly the same way that Guy had talked about being able to open the mnova files in mnova, the FCS files, as long as you have a program on your desktop to open FCS would be able to be opened using our live edit feature in whatever program you want to use to analyze that data. But the actual analysis of flow cytometry data is not yet supported.
Can the system communicate with other limbs in your lab?
Yes, that's a little bit more of an in-depth M-Gears question than I'm equipped to address, but there are other limb systems and chromatography data systems that M-Gears can communicate with out of the box. And since my background is software development, if it has an API, we can talk to it. But there are some supports that are available out of the box. I don't know them off the top of my head.
Okay. Can we have a demonstration and an evaluation?
Yes. Please contact the contact person that's listed here.
Okay, that's all of the questions for now. And if there are any more questions, please feel free to enter them now, or just forward them to us after this event and we'll get back to you with an answer, okay?
Well, thank you very much, Guy, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for developing such an interesting product.
Appreciate it. Have a great day. Great evening, I guess.
Yeah.
See you.
Bye-bye.